All right, while we're saying goodbye to our kids, let's do a little game. Let's do a game. It's pretty simple. It's true and false. That's not hard. Can you guys remember a time where you were excited, like in class when it was like quiz time and it was like true and false? You're like, at least I have a 50-50 chance. I haven't studied, but maybe like 50-50 I'll do okay. So this is going to be an easy one. I'm going to give you guys some statements that you've probably heard before. And I just want to see if you think that statement is true or if it's false. And we're just going to put up our hands and we're just going to indicate if we think it's true or false. All right, so let's look at the first statement. So a penny dropped from the top of the Empire State Building will kill you, right? Depending on where it hits you, it can kill you. How many of you, first of all, have you heard that before? All right, now how many of you guys would say it's true? How many of you say that's false? All right, so Mythbusters did a segment on it and they found that it's false. According to Mythbusters, even if that penny was traveling at the speed of sound, it wouldn't kill you. It would hurt like crazy, but it won't kill you. All right, next question. You can see the Great Wall of China from space. How many of you guys have heard that one before? I mean, that one gets touted a lot, like the only man-made structure that you can see from space. But is it true? How many of you guys say, yep, it's true? How many say, yeah, I think that one's false? Okay, a couple of you. All right, what is it? This one's false as well. This one's a false one. This one got me as well. Chinese astronauts actually found that, no, you cannot see it from space. So there you have it. All right, next one. Van Gogh cut off his ear in a fit of madness for a woman. How many of you guys have heard that one? How many of you guys don't even know who Van Gogh is? Like, it's that guy that you can barely see in the screen behind you. So is it true? Did he cut off his ear, or did he do that for a woman? Is it false? So most historians believe that this actually probably happened in a little fight that he had with a fellow artist, and in order to not make it come out like in the papers and maybe get this friend arrested, they came up with this weird story. So that's what historians say anyway. All right, next one. Walt Disney's body is cryogenically frozen. How many of you guys have heard it? How many of you, that's news to you. You had never heard that one before. All right, yeah, it's kind of weird. So is it true? Is it false? It is? It's false. It's false. This rumor actually got started when some executives went to the cryogenic lab, asked some questions about the procedure, and then word got to the Los Angeles Times, and sure enough, like the rumor was like, Walt Disney is going to be frozen. So that's how that one happened. I got one more for you. True or false? On average, you will swallow 8 spiders a year in your sleep. Some of you are like, I just really hope it's not true. How many of you have heard this one before, though? Yeah, I got in this huge debate in college with some friends about whether or not this was true or not. I was adamantly saying that this is false. What do you guys think, though? Is it true? How many of you guys say this one has to be false? So according to Scientific America, it's false. It's false. Every single one of these was false just because it's more fun to do it that way. So yeah, I know some of these things we believe, though, and I think there's probably a lot of reasons why we end up believing these things. You hear it often enough, and more people say this is true, this is true. You're like, okay, it must be true. I think also we're just kind of gullible at times. Sometimes we just have a gullibility about us. The Bible actually talks about not being so gullible. They don't use words. The Bible doesn't typically translate that word gullible as gullible. Instead, we use words like naive. The Bible uses words like simple or simple-minded. In fact, I'll read you a proverb that talks about this. Proverbs talks a lot about, simple-mindedness, wisdom. I'm going to read one of these. This is in Proverbs chapter 14, verse 15. It says, "The simple believe anything, but the prudent give thought to their steps." So the simple believe anything. That word simple in the Hebrew is actually the word pethai, which carries with it the idea that you are open to influence, which sounds kind of positive, but in this context, it's like the most negative. You're so open to influence that you don't actually use some discernment. You just believe anything. But the truth is, I think this is where we all start off in life. Like we all start off pretty simple, don't we? Simple-minded, open to influence. Some of us are a little bit more open to maybe learning new things than others. But as kids, like we just kind of take in the world. We're like open to whatever the world has to offer, good or negative. I remember as a kid. I was really, really young. I had an older brother whose influence I should not have been as open to. He convinced me, I was really young, so give me a break here. He convinced me that little boys grow up to be women and little girls grow up to be men. And it like blew my mind, right? I was like, you're kidding me. So I'm going to become a woman when I'm older? Yes, that's true. Wait, so mom was a little boy like me? Yeah, that's right. Wait. So dad, that's right. Dad was a little girl. It's like, whoa, man, I had no idea. Now, I was simple-minded back then. Maybe you believed really ridiculous things as a kid. This is where we all start off, and some of you are still a little gullible. Some of you may still feel a little simple-minded at times, and you believe things you shouldn't believe. I would say don't feel bad about that. Instead, feel maybe encouraged to graduate to wisdom, right? If you're simple-minded, just be encouraged to graduate to wisdom. Now, the Bible talks a lot about wisdom as well, particularly in the Proverbs. So, what is wisdom? I think there are a lot of different definitions. I think a really great biblical definition would be that wisdom is the desire to actually know God's truth and to be obedient to that truth. So wisdom, what is it? It's this desire to know what God has for you, know what God is instructing you in, and then be obedient once you understand what God's truth actually is. So knowing God's truth and being obedient to it. This is what we want to graduate to. Let me give you a verse that talks about the importance of wisdom, and it contrasts it with something else that you can graduate to. You guys know what you can graduate to if you don't graduate to wisdom? Foolishness. That's what it is. In Proverbs chapter 18, verse 2, it says this, "Fools find no pleasure in understanding, but delight in airing their own opinions." You ever find people, maybe find yourself doing this? You're not really interested in the truth. You're not really interested in knowing what God has for you. And then maybe even if you discover what God wants for you, you're like, nah, that's too difficult. That's too crazy. I don't know if that's even true. Right? Do you ever find yourself doing these things? This is what foolish people do. It would be the equivalent of me going through life, just assuming what my brother said was true, to the point where I was like, hey, Tim, you know what? Did you enjoy hopscotch when you were a little girl? Did you enjoy like jump rope when you were a little girl? Like, Tim would look at me like I'm an idiot. Like, what is wrong with you? I was never a little girl. And then we'd, I don't know, he'd have to prove it somehow. I don't know how he'd prove it, but sometimes I just say things and then I want to like take them back and it's too late. And this is the service that's actually being aired. So I apologize for that one. That one was not intended. But here's the thing. We all want to graduate. We want to graduate to wisdom, not to foolishness. And today, I already said it in the announcements, we're going to be talking about orphans today because it's Orphan Sunday. And I think that there are a lot of us, we're just simple-minded when it comes to what's happening around the world when it comes to orphans. I think we have, let me say this. Let's say I just throw out the word orphan to you, and I say, hey, what's the first thing? What are some of the images that come to your mind when you hear the word orphan? Like, if your mind starts thinking this, let's see that next picture. If your mind like goes here, Oliver Twist, early 19th century England, has a bowl saying, please, sir, can I have some more? Right? If that's what you're thinking when you hear orphan, at the very least, you have an outdated understanding of where the world is at. So what I want to do is let's move away from simple-mindedness and let's start moving into wisdom. What's happening? What does God desire of us? And then are we going to actually have hearts to be obedient? Are we going to be able to graduate to wisdom, or are we going to graduate to being fools in this area? Okay, so let's just talk about what is happening worldwide. Then we're going to go and explore even what's happening in our country and then even in our state. According to UNICEF, UNICEF actually defines orphans as any child under the age of 18 who has lost a parent. And so according to UNICEF, there are 153 million orphans in our world. That's a huge number. It's such a huge number that I think we have a hard time getting our heads around it. That's roughly half of the population of the United States. So half of the population of the United States, orphans around the world. And what's interesting is every single one of those kids, they're not just a number, but they're a face that smiles, and it's a face that cries. It's a heart that is excited and full of joy, and at the same time can experience fear and loss. Right? 153 3 million. Let me introduce you just to a few of them. Let's go to this next slide, please. So this is a young girl from India. No mom, no dad. Super adorable, and she's just looking for a mom and a dad to love her and to be able to love in return. Let's go to the next slide. This is a young man. He's entering his teen years, and he needs direction. He needs guidance. Let's go to the next slide. This is a adorable girl from Bolivia who does not have a parent. And you can imagine, waking up every single day needing some instruction, needing some guidance. She doesn't have it. When my wife and I were doing ministry in Eswatini, Africa, one of the ministries that we had was actually to child-headed households. And when you hear that term, child-headed households, that's exactly what it is. So we had primarily 3 families that we worked with, and each one of them, they had lost their parents due to HIV and AIDS. One was the Masugu family, and this was a family of 3 boys. One was the Dlamini family. This was a family where of 6. The oldest was an older teen, all the way down to elementary. Another one was the Gunene family. The Gunene family was a family of 8. The oldest was in her very early 20s, all the way down to 2 years old. All of these families, they had lost their parents due to HIV and AIDS. And I think we hear that and we're like, oh, that's definitely happening in other parts of the world. Like, we kind of get that. It's like, yeah, they're dealing with poverty. It's so much more acute there than it is here. But the truth is, even in the United States, this is a huge issue. And so let's go in and examine what's happening currently in the United States when it comes to orphans, when it comes to the foster care system. In order to do this, I thought we'd play another video that has been put out by America Kids Belong. Let's watch.
Something happens to you when you don't belong. I can't explain it really. But if you felt it, you know. There are over 400,000 of us in the U.S. foster care system. 100,000 are available for adoption and are waiting for a forever family. The rest of us kids are waiting to be reunited with our birth families and just need a loving foster family while we wait. Without a family, without a place to belong, it feels like no one knows your story. No one really sees you. You feel invisible. You probably don't know how much we need you, but we do. There aren't enough families to love us, to help us heal, to call us theirs. And the truth is, bad things happen when kids don't have a place to belong. Every year, 26,000 leave foster care when they're grown up and still without a family. Half never even got to graduate from high school. Others end up homeless, in trouble with the law, trafficked. It's a big problem, but the solution is so easy, even us kids know it. The solution is you. So it's time you met us, time you really got to know us. You'll see. We are brave. We are beautiful. We are worthy of belonging. The solution is you. Will you see our faces? Will you tell our stories? Will you help us belong?
So I'm just going to highlight a few of the numbers that they shared in the video. 400,000 children in foster care system in the United States, 400,000. Out of that 400,000, 100,000 of them are actually legally ready, desiring, able to be adopted. What happens to those that actually graduate and are actually moving out of the foster care system? Well, every single year, there's 26,000 that move out of the foster care system never having known mom and dad, like a new family that they needed. Just put yourself in that situation. When you were 18, if you were like me, you were excited about being 18, right? Legally, you're an adult. Legally, you could like take on the world and do adult things, right? But were you really ready? Like to really full-fledged, I'm an adult, take on all the responsibilities that adulthood has to offer? I don't think most of us were. Like even if you were, wasn't it really nice to at least have a fallback plan in case your life plan blew up in your face? Like you had this, well, I have a family that even if this doesn't work out, maybe they could help me out. Well, for 26,000 kids every single year, there is no safety net. There is no fallback plan. Let me tell you what happens. And again, this was just highlighted from the video. Less than half end up graduating high school. 1 in 4 will be in trouble with the law within just 2 years of having moved out of the foster care system. Nearly 2/3 of the girls will be pregnant by age 21. 1 in 4 will experience post-traumatic stress disorder in their lifetime. This is actually more than twice the rate of U.S. veterans of war, which is huge. A lot of trauma that they experienced. 1 in 5 will become homeless, and all have an exponentially higher risk of becoming victims of human trafficking. So this is what's happening here, not in some developing country, but actually in our developed world. What's happening here in Kentucky, though? Let me give you just a few numbers when it comes to just shedding some light on what's happening here. So currently, there are 9,000 children in the foster care system here in Kentucky. Within just our region alone, there's 1,000 who are in the foster care system. Out of that number, there are 650 who are ready to be adopted. They are looking for a home. They are desiring a mom and dad, siblings. And so if you have been sitting here and maybe you've been bored with worship and maybe you've been bored with this sermon so far and you've just been counting all of the white ribbons that we have here, well, it gets a little bunchy here on the cross, so maybe you weren't able to successfully count them. But there are 650 white ribbons, all representing a child who is not just a number, but has a smiling face, who desires a mom and a dad to call their own. And so all month long, we're going to leave these up because this is the month that many organizations kind of focus in on foster care. Guys, we're just scratching the surface, though. Like, to say that, hey, let's now graduate to wisdom and let's really tackle this issue, I know that we're just scratching the surface of this, but we can't just hear this information and say, well, someone else will solve it. Like, I think we have, as Christians, as followers of Christ, He actually expects us to understand how much our hearts and our lives have been transformed by a loving Heavenly Father who has adopted us into His family and His home, that we say, we've got to solve this. And so many Christians, so many churches are doing that, and I think we need to be one of them. We need to graduate to wisdom, not to foolishness in this area. Now, when you think of wise kings, maybe even just wise individuals in the Bible, but particularly wise kings, who are some of the people that you think of? Maybe Solomon. He's probably first on some of your radar, at least early in his term. He kind of went a little weird towards the end. Maybe King David, that's someone that you might have in your mind. He was a man after God's own heart. Clearly, a lot of wisdom in King David. I would love for you to add someone else to the list if he's not already on the list, and that's Josiah. You guys familiar with Josiah, the King Josiah? If you're not, that's okay. I'll give you a little bit of background. He was 8 years old when he became king, which is pretty crazy because talk about simple-minded, right? And you're supposed to be leading a nation. Think about yourself at age 8. You were too simple-minded to do these things. But Josiah, in the purest sense of that definition, he was open to influence and he was open to the right influence. So scripture is brought to Josiah. And this is scripture that was rolled out and read to him. And this was something that he didn't know existed. He didn't know that this was actually God's instruction to him and to the nation of Israel. And when he heard this read, you know what he does? He tears his clothes. And there, if you ever read the Bible, particularly the Old Testament, there's a lot of robe tearing that goes on. This is basically just a symbol of grief, of mourning, of humility. And he does this because there's this understanding of, oh my goodness, how far we've come from what God has originally designed us as a people to be doing and how to actually be responding to Him. So he tears his clothes, and then, guess what? He graduates to wisdom. So once he has the information in his brain, he says, okay, well, how can we be obedient to this? And so he reinstitutes several of the festivals. He actually ends up tearing down these high places that were used for all kinds of pagan worship and idol worship. And he begins to chart the direction of the Israelite people to once again follow after God because they went astray. And so this is where the nation of Judah went. But unfortunately, although Josiah had lots of wisdom, and the Bible actually refers to him as a righteous king, you don't have to look too far to find the opposite. In fact, you don't have to look further than his own kids. One of his children, his name is Jehoiakim. Jehoiakim, unlike his dad, when his dad passes away, Jehoiakim you can actually read about this in Jeremiah 36, but Jeremiah writes him some instruction that God has for him. And so this scroll is brought to Jehoiakim, and instead of reading it and tearing his clothes and living out obedience to it, you know what Jehoiakim does? No kidding, he tears something else. He tears each piece of the scroll, each line in the scroll, and he burns it with fire. He graduates to foolishness, to unrighteousness. And it's not just Jehoiakim. Jehoiakim actually has a younger brother who was king just for a short time before Jehoiakim takes the throne. And we read about his story, just a little bit of it, in Jeremiah chapter 22. If you want to turn there, if you've got your Bibles, go ahead and turn to Jeremiah 22. We're going to be there just for a bit. But in Jeremiah 22, Jeremiah is going to contrast these two individuals. One with wisdom, one who is just a fool, one who lived out a righteous life, one who lived out unrighteousness. Verse 11. For this is what the Lord says about Shallum, son of Josiah, who succeeded his father as king of Judah, but has gone from this place. He will never return. He will die in the place where they have led him captive. He will not see this land again. So what happened to him? He was king for about 3 months. And then he was deported to Egypt by the Egyptians. And God says that's where he's going to die. That's what's going to happen. And then what do we learn about him? Why was he unrighteous? What makes him a fool? Notice 13. Woe to him who builds his palace by unrighteousness, his upper rooms by injustice, making his own people work for nothing, not paying them for their labor. He says, I will build myself a great palace with spacious upper rooms. So he makes large windows in it, panels it with cedar, and decorates it in red. Does it make you a king to have more and more cedar? What do we see? What do we see in this unrighteous son of Josiah? We see somebody who's really focused on himself. I think we get this picture with this fact that he's not even paying the laborers to build him his palace. And then notice how that last sentence in verse 15 ends. It says, what makes you a king? Is it to have more and more? What was he focused on? He was focused on more and more. It's all about him, right? It's not about meeting needs. It's about getting more and more. And once I have more and more, well, that's not quite enough. I need to have more and more. And that's just not enough, so I need more and more. And he was actually deemed unrighteous because of his thoughts and his behaviors. This is contrast then with his dad. Notice how his dad is described starting in the middle of verse 15. It says, did not your father have food and drink? He did what was right and just, so all went well with him. Get this. He defended the cause of the poor and needy, and so all went well. Is that not what it means to know me, declares the Lord? So we see completely different lifestyles, right? And one king is considered righteous. One king is considered someone of wisdom who understood God's truth, lived by that truth. And the other one, a fool who lived unrighteously. And there were a few benefits of actually living righteously. What do we see Josiah being described as? Well, someone that all went well with him because he was focused on what God desired. I don't know about you, but I like it when all goes well with me. And if that means living righteously, living in wisdom, understanding God's truth and living by that truth, sign me up. I'm all about it. I don't like when things don't go well for me. And then we also understand in verse 16 that this idea of actually looking after those who are in need, those who are in poverty, those who actually need a help up, well, that's the very heart of God. God is a generous God who takes care of needs. This is what we want. In fact, as a church, one of our core values is actually to give up things that we love for who we love even more. One of our core values as a church is we are people who give up things that we love. Instead of just having more and more and more, we give up things that we love for who we love even more, to meet others' needs. Jesus, I think, understood how oftentimes we move towards wisdom, and then sometimes we take 2 steps back towards foolishness. I think he understood this even when it came to his disciples, and that's why he gives the instructions to them that he does in Matthew chapter 10. If you want, you can turn over to Matthew chapter 10. I'll give you a little bit of the background. So Jesus is about to send his disciples on somewhat of a short-term missions trip, and rather than telling his disciples, hey, make sure you take your malaria pills, make sure you don't drink the water, you got to boil it first, hey, let's have a quick time of prayer before we close out in service. Like, that's how we typically handle our short-term missions workers. But this is what Jesus says to the disciples. He says, I am sending you out like sheep among wolves. Therefore, be as shrewd as snakes and as innocent as doves. What's he saying? He's saying, hey, where you're headed, man, it's going to be hostile. Where you're headed, you're going to see need after need, and there are going to be people that might even abuse you. They might even attack you. So here's the thing. You need to be as innocent as doves. You need to be as shrewd as snakes. What does that actually look like? What does that mean? Well, innocent as doves. Where do we go? Wherever we go with Christ, we go with peace, right? When we see needs, we have compassion. Wherever we go, we actually look for problems and find a way to solve those problems because God has solved the greatest problem in our heart, and so we naturally do the same for other people. It says, hey, have great compassion, but at the same time, don't be foolish. At the same time, don't be someone who is naive. Don't be somebody who's simple-minded, because you could find yourself getting in a lot of trouble, and you can actually maybe do more harm than good. Again, as a church, if we want to graduate to wisdom, and we've got this big, huge problem called orphans, right? This big problem with so many people, they don't have loving moms and dads. Well, how do we solve that problem in a way that represents Christ well? Well, we need to be as innocent as doves and as shrewd as snakes. We need to have great compassion and at the same time, lots of wisdom in order to tackle this thing. So let me give you maybe some guardrails on this. First of all, let me challenge you when it comes to, as a Christian, as a church, as maybe life groups, maybe as a youth ministry or whatever, let me encourage you, do not undercommit to solving this problem. Because I think so many times we can just undercommit. Because when it comes to orphans, we have this understanding that they need loving homes. So that means adopting, right? We love adoption around here. Some of you, your story, you were adopted as a kid. And we love that story. Some of you, you're in the process of adopting children. Some of you have adopted children. Some of you are fostering. Some of you are going through the paperwork and doing the classes in order to actually foster and adopt. We love that. My family, my extended family, I've got nieces and I've got nephews because of adoption, like the ever-growing Gleason family, because of adoption. If you have put your faith in Jesus Christ, guess what? You've been adopted into the family of God. That's your story. So this church, we love adoption. But if we think that adoption is the only way to solve this problem, well, then you'll probably undercommit, won't you? Some of you are just not in a position. You're not in a life stage. You may look at how God has shaped you, and you're like, I don't think that's how God shaped me. So I don't know if I can adopt. And so you'll walk out of here, and you'll graduate with a diploma. Because you'll be thinking to yourself, well, because I can't adopt, well, I can't do anything. But what does God call us to do? What does God call us to do? You probably already saw this coming. If you're a student of Scripture, you're like, okay, Adoption Sunday, he's probably going to read this verse. I'm going to read it to you. James, chapter 1, verse 27. What does God call us to do? How can we graduate to wisdom? It says, religion that God our Father accepts. And again, we can kind of get hung up on that religion word. Don't get hung up on it. It's just the outward expression of your inner beliefs, right? In fact, that word religion, it can be a synonym. In the Greek, that word religion can be a synonym for worship. So we could even read this, worship that God our Father accepts. We'll just read it as we see it right here. Religion that God our Father accepts is pure and faultless is this, to look after, what? To look after orphans and widows in their distress, and to keep oneself from being polluted by the world. So if you're sitting here, and you're thinking about undercommitting because, well, I can't adopt, and you walk out those doors and you're thinking to yourself, well, I can't do anything because I can't adopt. Well, you just got a diploma. And that diploma says you're a fool. Because I know that sounds way harsh. But here's the thing. There's plenty that you can do to care and look after orphans in their distress, even if it isn't adoption. What are those things? We'll talk about them in just a moment. Let me challenge you also. At the same time that we don't want you to undercommit, we do not want you to overcommit. I would say probably in the last decade or so, this awareness of the crisis in the foster care system, orphans around the world, particularly with Christians, it's become more and more acute. We understand more and more. And so there's stories that come out, and every time I hear one of these stories, it's like, ugh. And there's stories of well-meaning Christians who they want to heal, but they assume that if they're going to adopt or they're going to foster this child, it's going to be one massive love fest, right? It's going to be like, man, they're going to be so grateful, and they're going to be so well behaved because, my goodness, they finally got a loving mom and dad. But if you already heard me say, so many of these kids come from traumatic situations, and they end up going through PTSD. So these are very difficult cases at times. And so to assume that this is just going to be one love fest after the other, well, what ends up happening is these Christians, they commit, and then they realize how difficult it is, and then they back away. So you can imagine, you're one of these kids, and they're trying to help heal you, but then they don't stick to the commitment that they made to you. Well, that's probably going to hurt more than heal, isn't it? And so the challenge is here, okay, don't undercommit, but don't overcommit. And I'll just share personally how this has kind of played itself out in our family. So my wife, you might know this, maybe you don't. My wife, since doing ministry in East Watini and particularly in Tennessee and now here in Kentucky, she's been working really hard to get kids adopted. And she works with America Kids Belong. So she's got a big heart for this. I've got a tiny heart for this. I'm trying to get a bigger heart for it. But she's got this huge heart, and she's always like, what do you think? Should we foster? Should we adopt? And it's like, honey, I've got like 4. I've got a 5th one on the way. That's crazy, right? I can't adopt. I can't foster. However, last year, God began to do something in my heart that I did not want Him doing in my heart. He began to speak some things to me, saying, hey, maybe you should foster. Maybe you should adopt, because that's what I did in your heart, or that's what I did in your life. And it was like, I don't even want to pray about this. I just want to go, nah, I don't know. I can't hear you, God. I can't hear you. And I definitely didn't want to talk to Dana about it, because I knew if I just even just sort of cracked that door open, she'd just kick it in and be like, we're going to have 25 more kids. And I was like, no. So I refused to pray about it. I refused to talk to Dana about it. It just kept coming up though, in my personal prayer times, in my personal devotion, in my sermon prep time. It just kept coming up over and over again. And I began to realize, I think I'm Jonah right now. I'm running for Tarshish when I should be running to Nineveh. It's I know what happened to him. I don't want that. So, okay, maybe I can pray about it, and maybe I can talk to Dana about it. And so I brought it up to her, and she didn't go crazy, which was nice. She said, okay, well, let's pray about it. And we prayed about it. We eventually brought it up to the boys, and the boys were on board with it. And so at the beginning of this year, we actually started the process to become foster parents. And then it's a long process. It's about 6 months. There's a lot of paperwork, lots of paperwork, and classes and in-home visitations, and it's a lot of work. It takes about 6 months. So no kidding, at the end of the 6 months, the week after, maybe 2 weeks after, we get a surprise. And the surprise was that Dana's pregnant. And guess what? Some of you have been wondering, did they plan that? No, we did not plan that. I don't even know how these things happen. Honestly, someone needs to sit me down and have a talk, because I know how it happens, all right, and I'm okay with it. All right, not to make it awkward. All right, so here's what we did. Once we had all of our plans for foster care, and now we've got this baby, it's I gotta hit the pause button, honey. I don't even know how this is all gonna affect our lives. Can we just put the foster thing on pause? And she was all for it too. And I know some of you are looking at me Pastor, you have little faith, in God's strength and power. You could do it. You should have done it. I agree with you. Dana could absolutely pull it off. This guy needed to hit the pause button, because why? It would have been overcommitting. For me, right now, at this season, it would be overcommitting. But does that mean I can't do something? Does that mean I just back out altogether? I think what we need to look for is, this is a problem, and it's a problem that God desires us to address. And so there's that tension of, let's not undercommit, but at the same time, you better not overcommit. I think the healthy place to be is, do whatever begins to stretch you, okay? where you actually have to lean a little bit more on God and have a little bit more faith to actually pull it off. That's where I think that healthy place needs to be. And so let me share with you just a few suggestions when it comes to actually helping to solve this problem. Number one, I think some of you actually are called to adopt. You may not even know it yet, but God's doing something in your heart right now, and He's going to continue doing something in your heart in the next few days, weeks, maybe years, and you will actually adopt or possibly foster. If that ends up being you, or there's just this, maybe, I don't know, so I should investigate this. As you leave today, there is a table, and there's all kinds of information from America Kids Belong, and there's a sign-up sheet. If you're interested, sign up on that, and Dana will just start to give you some information so that you can at least start the process of investigation. Is this what God's calling you to? Second, I would challenge you, maybe be a part of our WRAP ministry. All right, so we've got a slide that kind of explains this. This is a ministry that would wrap around those who are currently fostering or adopting. And what do? You bring words of encouragement, because this can be a very challenging place to be for parents, day in, day out. And so you are just consistently thinking of ways that you can encourage them. Also, you can do respite care. If you're not familiar with that term, it allows parents to have a little bit of a break. So you take the kid for a few hours, maybe a weekend. If it's just babysitting time, you don't need to have any certification for that. If you want a weekend or a little bit more, like a week, you have to be certified to do that. My wife and I were respite certified. Also, acts of service. This ministry would be one of those things where you call people up and say, don't worry about cooking dinner tonight. We've bought it. We're bringing it over. You just have family time. Don't worry about mowing the lawn this weekend. I'm bringing over the lawnmower and I'm doing it for you so that you can just do what God has called you to do when it comes to fostering. And then to pray. And this, I know it seems little, but is huge because God is at work in prayer. So one of the things you can do if you're interested, again, on your way out, there's going to be a table with all kinds of information. If you want to be a part of this WRAP ministry, write your name down and we'll be in contact with you shortly. I would also encourage you to follow Kentucky Kids Belong on their Facebook and Instagram accounts. This is a really great way to get the word out. So every single week there are video posts as well as other posts. And if you can like them and you can share it, well, this gets the word out of the need and how people can interact with foster care. And then finally, I would encourage you to just check out the table in general and see what else is available. We've got a whole sheet that has front and back sides of all kinds of other different things that you can do to participate. But with that, I would encourage you to make this your prayer. It's a bold prayer. It's one that I would encourage you not to take lightly. I would encourage you today on Adoption Sunday, I would encourage you to pray this prayer. God, who's adopted me, God, whatever it is that you're calling me to do, when it comes to meeting the needs of orphans and vulnerable kids, I'm open to it. Like, just make that your prayer. God, whatever you call me to, I'm open to do whatever you call me to. But don't take that one lightly. And as you're thinking about even making that your prayer this Sunday, I would encourage you maybe to process it as you are introduced to just one of the kids of the 650 who exist in our state alone who are looking for a mom, a dad, a family. Watch this video.
If I would have a wish in the world, it would be a love of family that would take me, a 17-year-old, would love me, treat me respectfully, and love me, and I need that love because I don't have no place to go. Like, I need a family that's gonna help me, and I need a place to be right now. My friends say I am a confident person because I always confident, supportive person to help them when they're upset. They said I'm a sweet person, I'm a lovable person to be with. They said I'm helpful no matter what happens to me or what happens in the world. And they always say you can always stick up for yourself no matter what happens in the world. Some things I like to do is art, sewing, drawing, painting, coloring and bunch of craft stuff. I like to do hair. I like to pick out shoes. I like to pick my outfit. I like to style my own outfit. I like to go shopping. And I like to go to the mall. I'm a swimmer. I'm a really good swimmer. I can dive off the diving board. I can sit on the bottom of the pool without coming up to catch my breath. I smile when people tell me jokes, when people tickle me. It's when people always say I'm a lovable person. When people always smile, it makes me smile. I want to go to Myrtle Beach with my dad because me and him had planned for a long time, but since he passed away, I wanted to do it with someone else, and now I guess I'm gonna have to do it with my new dad, and I'm gonna move on from it. I want to have a mom and a dad that's gonna love me, support me, and hold me when I'm in my depression mode and stuff like that.
Knock, knock.
Who's there?
Yodel-a-hee.
Olehi, who?
I did not know you could yodel.
I'm Sierra and I'm 17 years old.
So again, Sierra is just one of 650 kids who are looking for a home. If you guys are ready to make that your prayer, God, whatever it is that you call me to look after orphans and vulnerable kids, I'm up for it. Because I would encourage you to make that your prayer as we pray right now. God, we are people who know what it means to be loved by the perfect Father. And Father, because of your great love for us, we want to be a people that don't just receive, we don't want just more and more for ourselves, but we become people who actually step into other people's needs, begin solving problems that you give us the capacity to solve. Father, give us big hearts, ones that are filled with compassion, and give us a mind that is full of your wisdom and your truth, and that we would live it out obediently. I pray all this in your Son, Jesus' name. Amen.